let's talk about the tournament. So with the closed beta came a lot of content, lots of people streaming, and lots of competitions, including our own competition. We had the ESPN Esports VALORANT Invitational. Ours was a little bit of a different spin. And Tyler, you were really at the genesis of this because that entire tournament, to your credit, dub in the chat for Tyler, because it really started with one tweet. You literally put out one tweet and it turned into an entire tournament. So take me through that, man.
So I remember at the start of I think one of the first things I really recognized at the start of the beta is that players from different backgrounds were playing the game differently. Watching XQC's stream was entirely different than watching Brack's stream, right? Where Brax was way more methodical, played the game much, more intelligently, where he was playing it to as you would as a Counter-Strike player, where he's mowing down people, opping, just doing an amazing job, where XQC's going on Raze and he's using the abilities to give himself an advantage when his aim isn't up to the level of a Brax. So I was like, what would happen? I mean, I'm sure I was like, yeah, Counter-Strike players would win, but what would happen if you got pros and, famous people and streamers from, every discipline, Overwatch, Apex, Fortnite, PUBG, and I put out that tweet. It's like, would people want to see this? This was not like some kind of like marketing tweet where this was already in the plans before I tweeted about it. I tweeted out just because I thought it'd be a fun tweet. And I was like, hypothetically, this would be cool. I tweet it gets a lot of like thousands of likes. People are discussing it, saying like, Counter-Strike would win. This would be fun, but CS pros would just destroy everyone. And then our video head of ESPN Esports, Dave Presley, came to me and basically said, "Can we make this happen? Can we make this happen?" I was like, "Maybe." And it's a thing that like it started as just talking as casually like this could happen. Maybe let's like reach out to some people. I reached out to, I believe, Canadian who is, the Rainbow Six Siege world champion. I asked him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm in. Like, I got a team. I can get a team together." I'm like, "Okay, we got one." And then that led to like Ace, and that led to, Brax. And then when you get the big names, coming in, and the other big names see that and are like, "Hey, this is going to be a pretty fun tournament. Like, you get a name for yourself out there." And it just kind of snowballed. And then less than 2 weeks later, the tournament was on the air. Jacob's casting. We have Simo. We have Arda casting. Kevin Naki. It's a 3-day event. League of Legends teams out there of Double Lift. During his whole debacle of where he's going, if he's going to get traded from Team Liquid, like it was an amazing tournament. Like I do think there was higher level tournaments by the end of the beta. I think. Especially like the T1 X Nerd Street Gamer Invitation, which had a $25,000 prize pool, was kind of the kingpin of beta tournaments. But I do think that we had some of the best play of any tournament in the closed beta. It was a really fun tournament, and we had some dream matchups. And in the end, we actually had a surprise of Team Canyon, the Apex Legends team, who, to be fair, like a player like Ace, who was on the, Apex team, did have a long history in Counter-Strike. They actually came out, as the winners, beating Team Counter-Strike, or the players made up of Counter-Strike players in the final of Team Mirage. So it was an amazing tournament. You guys can talk more about it, from casting perspective, but someone who put the tournament together with Dave, it was a blast. And I just want to thank the players again. I know it's been 2 months since then, but I just want to thank all the players again for playing in that tournament. It was some of the most fun I've had at ESPN. So thank you.
We had a lot of people sort of like come out and stand out in that tournament too, right? Remember, like Boostio was a late addition because we had a couple of different of the members of Team Heroes, the Overwatch team. They bailed out on us last minute. XQC and Seagull had other things come up. But we saw like Boostio come in as a last minute sub and then like pop off. Like he was like one of the stories of the tournament. And same thing with a couple of the other players as well. It really like fantastic tournament for some of these guys who like maybe you didn't expect for them to be anything. And Team Heroes actually made playoffs, which was a little bit surprising too in terms of how they went down with their round robin. Surprising nonetheless, right? Especially that Team Mirage didn't win because a lot of people sort of put a lot of stock into some of the Counter-Strike players relative in Valorant. And look, like I know that the best Counter-Strike players are not these guys. That's true. And I know that some of the best Counter-Strike players are actually quite good at Valorant, like Elysian and Nitro and some of the other guys from Liquid and other who have put some time into Valorant. Nonetheless, though, I think it was a surprising result, and it was interesting to sort of figure out how people were playing at the time relative to what they had played in the past.
That was a lot of fun to cast. I had a blast casting that one. And yeah, Jacob, I agree that there were a lot of surprising teams and players. Emily, you've done a lot of diving into compositions and meta throughout the entire closed beta, whether it was our tournament, whether it was the T1 tournament. You've watched a lot. So what have you gathered from how pros are playing this game throughout the closed beta? I think you're muted.
You are indeed muted.
Sorry. I think the biggest thing, it's because there's a lot of noise outside from my neighbor's kids. I think the biggest thing that kind of stayed true, or like we saw the initial beginnings of in the ESPN Invitational, that's kind of remained throughout regarding agent selection, was the rise of the like Brimstone Breach combo. So people basically you had to have a Sage, you had to have a Vision agent, which ended up being Cypher over Sova. And then we saw kind of Brimstone be like required, and Breach rising up for the Smokes and Flashbang respectively. And I think it's actually like in the more recent tournaments I watched, it's actually flip-flopped, where it's Breach that's actually the more important agent. And Brimstone kind of dropped a little bit in estimation, but is still selected really frequently, either with a Sova for another Vision agent, or they're traded out for an entry fragger like Raze, who is actually the most popular one, which I think is the other big thing, that the Raze nerfs, like the initial Raze nerfs, came through during the tournament. And since there's no like, we don't have like a tournament realm, right? Like it's just, we're playing off of closed beta. So Raze was suddenly nerfed on the final day of the tournament, and she saw no play as opposed to, I think, like 75% on the day before. But I think
day for Dizzy.
Yeah, well, he swapped a Breach and he looked pretty rough on the first time, but then he was like really good on it by the end of it. So I mean, credit to him for having like the kind of skill where you can improve at an agent that quickly. I think the big thing though, like from that invitational, I think, was that we saw the first like kind of standard meta composition with Sage, Cypher, Brim, Breach, and then whoever you wanted to select as your fifth, either another Vision agent in Sova, or something like the Jet. It really depended on the players on the team too. Like Kefri, for example, was the one who was bringing out the Jet along with Ace. So yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that came out of that tournament for me was that we saw kind of the genesis of the what became the basic composition for most of the closed beta from Team Mirage.
Before we get into the global effect of this game, to wind down the conversation of this timeline, as we played through the closed beta, all of us had access. We played it extensively for the couple months that we had it until it shut down. What were our biggest takeaways from it? And also, how did we feel both as a game for casual players and as an esport in terms of its health and longevity possibilities going into the launch? Tyler, let's start with you.
Personally, I thought it was great. I mean, I am pretty forward saying that I like games a lot, but I enjoy watching them far more. Where like I'll play League of Legends, but I'll watch 10 times more of League of Legends. It's always just been how I've been. So this was one of the real first games that kind of grabbed me and made me want to become better. It frustrated me how poor I was playing during the alpha, and how I felt like I was holding people back, where I kind of wanted to grind and I wanted to get better at the game. I wanted to get good at this game, or not even good. I wanted to be at least, acceptable enough to play with my friends and kind of be mid-table if possible. And it kind of pushed me. And I think the best thing about this game, as from a lower elo side or just a player side, is that the amount of work you put into the game, you get it out of it, right? It's very similar to Counter-Strike, where if you put in the hours, you're going to get better at this game, and you're going to feel better playing the game, where you're going to see yourself improving on very little things, and those little things might not end up where you're just going to be, fragging out, getting 30 kills, but you'll go from, 6 kills a game to 9 kills a game to getting a 15 kill game, or you're going to get that 25 kill game where you feel like a god, even though you're stomping on against bronze and iron players, right? So on a personal level, and I think it's on a level of us playing it, it really does reward players who put in the time. I think in terms of the casual streaming market and the esports market, it'll be very interesting. Where I do agree with Jacob, and I believe we've said this before, is that this money, the streaming market for this game will be esports. Where I do think there will be some big streamers like a Hiko and a Defron and players who play this game as just, on a streaming level, they'll be popular. But I don't think this is going to be like a League of Legends or Fortnite where you can have casual Valorant streams, right? You can't listen to music. You can't just relax while playing a Valorant game, chit-chatting to chat. Like, there's a lot of, you have to focus. You have to listen to footsteps. It's a very, competitive game. We'll see how the new game mode is. Maybe the game mode will be much more streamer-friendly, which should be great for Twitch streamers who don't want to have, a serious time and, kind of interact with chat. But the core game mode isn't made for streaming, I believe. It's really made for esports, where very similar to Counter-Strike, where if you go on the Counter-Strike system, so Twitch for most days, you have your top Brazilian streamers, you have your top, NA and European streamers, but the real moneymaker for Counter-Strike on Twitch is the esports tournaments. And right now, with Valorant, I think it has potential to be a great esports game. But the spectator mode is absolute trash, and it is very bad. And as someone who's probably watched the most Valorant tournaments of anyone in the world, I've watched Korean tournaments, I've watched NA tournaments, I've watched European tournaments, I've watched pretty much everything. It's gotten worse, where now in the spectator mode, I don't know how it's going to look on launch. Hopefully it's better on launch. I'm praying it's better on launch. But by the end of the beta, the spectator mode, if you killed someone on the enemy team or someone died, it would just have a phoenix head, and it would be an extra phoenix head, and that's so confusing. And just that alone makes the spectator mode terrible, where it's very hard to when it takes you that amount of time to realize who's alive on each team, it just makes your competitive esport terrible. So hopefully they can fix that.
I agree. The observer mode is definitely in need of a giant buff.
We had a lot of issues with it, just peeling back the curtain a little bit when we did our invitational in terms of the way that you would program it. The numbers would switch at halftime, so each player would be a different number, and if you have a stream deck, obviously you could program those, so you could pop and go player to player and label with tape on a MIDI controller. But that's it would change at half, and it wouldn't change. One wouldn't become 6. Right, it would randomize at half, which was a huge issue to be able to sort of know who is who and be able to flip that. And so I saw that Darkoplock, who is a viewer of ours, actually asked Morello about this, and Morello said he was not sure, but he didn't think that Spectator was a big focus for launch. So Waylon Roselle told me over the weekend that they've been working, his team, the esports team at Riot, has been working really closely with Anna and Joe and the development team at Riot for Valorant, but particularly on things like Spectator, making this sort of a little bit more esports friendly in some ways. But yeah, I mean, the Spectator is really terrible, and it's something that Counter-Strike has gotten really well, is that the Counter-Strike Spectator is really what's the right word here? I mean, it's got so many different ways that you can use it effectively to sort of create hype, not even just the X-ray, but the overview camera and things like that, which Valorant has some of that, but it needs a lot of tweaking to sort of get there. And so I hope that Morello's maybe just out of the loop and that we're going to get something special today with it. But if he's right and it wasn't a focus of the launch, then
Yikes.
I'm a little worried about some of the tournaments we're going to see popping up in the next couple of weeks, because it is definitely sort of the biggest thing that needs to be changed from an esports perspective.
Not even a couple of weeks. We have a tournament tomorrow, Twitch Rivals. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're doing a Twitch Rivals.
I was
tournament.
they are launching this with a tournament.
I will give NGE, who runs Twitch Rivals, I'll give them a little bit of love, because I actually think of most of the people who've been running Valorant tournaments, they've done it probably among the best from a spectator perspective. They're a pretty robust production company if you're unfamiliar. But yeah, nonetheless, it needs to be fixed, because that company's not going to run every single Valorant tournament over the next couple of weeks. It kind of needs to be a priority, in my opinion.